Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Easy Mini Painting with me, Christopher Ridge. And we're going to knock out King Ghidorah here from the Godzilla Tokyo Clash board game. Another super simple one. This took me like 20 or 30 minutes, something like that. So shouldn't be too difficult, and anyone of any skill level should be able to knock him out here. So I'm going to quit blathering, and we're just going to get started.
Now, the first thing that I did was I went over the whole thing with a brown color, and in this particular case, I used the Army Painter brand Oak Brown. You can use whatever color you want, kind of whatever shade that you want, but you want this sort of like chocolatey, dark caramel sort of thing. That's going to make a pretty good first layer. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move on to a little bit of red. You can take any sort of... Just don't use too bright of a red color. I'm going to be using Dragon Red in this case, but we're just going to be using a little bit of that, and we're going to use that to go over his mouths, or her mouths, his mouths. I'm pretty sure Ghidorah's technically a male character, I think. Well, King Ghidorah, yeah, that makes sense. And then it doesn't really matter what brush you use, just as long as you use one that, isn't too huge, but also isn't too, small or detailed or anything like that. And you're just going to really quickly go over the interior of the mouths. So kind of like that. You don't want to do anything that's too bright because you don't want to, distract too much from the rest of the, color scheme, but you also don't want to do anything too dark that it's just indistinguishable from the brown itself. So, just find, sort of a combination of colors, this brown and red color that you like, but make sure that the brown that you use is slightly dark, because we're going to go over everything with a gold color, because King Ghidorah is gold, and that's the whole thing that we're going for here. Alright, there you go. Just a little something like that. Using that same color, though, and a smaller brush, I'm going to be using a sort of a detailed brush here. I'm just going to dot his eyes really quickly here, too. I would say that this is optional. If you don't want to do this, don't worry about it, but if you just want to bring out his eyes just a little bit more, because I believe he's got, glowing red eyes. You don't have to do anything too fancy, just simple something like that. That's all you need to do. Oh, he's coming off of my base that I had here. I have him on this little base just to kind of give me a little bit of extra support for while I'm painting him. Gotta stick him back on there. There we go. Okay, that's good. Alright, and then that's pretty much it. I'm pretty much done with that. So again, we've got the mouths, and we've got the eyes, and now I'm going to rinse off the brush. And now we're going to move on to the exciting part of painting this miniature, which is getting the gold on there. So I'm going to take out Greedy Gold. Again, you don't necessarily have to use this particular variety of paints. Just choose whatever brand you want, but just try to get colors that match as closely as possible. And they don't have to be exact, obviously. If you stress yourself out too much trying to get colors that match, too much to this video, then you're probably going to be stressing yourself out more than you really need to. But I'm going to take out a dry brush here. And if you saw the last video, the one where we painted Godzilla, then you have a pretty clear understanding of how dry brushing works. You can watch that video if you would like, but it's pretty straightforward. You just take a dry brush like this, get some paint onto it, but then wipe off most of it, and then just go over basically the entirety of the miniature. Just be mindful of where all of the sort of low points are of the miniature, and try to keep certain parts still kind of dark. But this is what's going to give us our depth, and this is what's going to give us the actual coloration that King Ghidorah has. King Ghidorah has. Jeez, I can English. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why did I even bother doing the coat of brown on there when I could just go over the whole thing with all gold? Well, because then it would just kind of look flat. And that's sort of why we wanted to paint all of these miniatures a little bit more anyway, because there's not a lot of depth. So if you just have a single color, then everything just sort of looks plasticky and flat and not very dynamic or three-dimensional. And if you have, an underlayer of sort of a dark color, and then the actual coloration on top of that, then you get shadow, you get shade. And that's how you get depth, and that's how you get your miniatures to look really, really cool. Now, you can use shades, you can use quick shades, or if you're using Citadel brand paints from, Warhammer, you get quick shades and that kind of thing. And those are really, really easy to use. But we're kind of doing this under the, not necessarily assumption, but with the goal in mind of letting anyone who's a new painter pick up the hobby without having to go buy like fancy supplies. Like if you wanted to, you could just buy any sort of brand of paints from any sort of like, you know, craft store or retail store that you want to go to, and you can just get going on it. You don't need to buy special shades and special brushes. I mean, arguably you would want to get a dry brush here, which is just a really thick bristled brush that, you know, is nice and thick, and, you know, can just stand up to a lot of wear and tear. But apart from that, yeah, you don't really need to buy any special brushes. You don't need to buy any special shades. We're gonna try to use painting methods that anybody can get access to and anybody can use. Any sort of skills and abilities and resources that anyone can use. Ghidorah, stay on your base. He keeps popping off. He's a king. He can't be contained. Godzilla's gonna have stuff to say about that, though. I will tell you what. All right. Look at that. Well, goodness gracious me, we're pretty much done, right? I mean, that's pretty much King Ghidorah right there, right? He's basically just a solid gold color. But why don't we do just a little bit more? I don't think that this is technically canon, but we might as well just do some things to bring out some of his features just a little bit, just a little tiny bit. So I'll move on to another color here after rinsing off my brush completely. So I'm going to be using a color called Desert Yellow. It's sort of like a desaturated mustardy color. It's sort of like a tannish, yellowish, brownish something or other. But I like to use just kind of like off-white colors like that for the things that I'm going to do here. Which the first of which is going to be the little claws on his feet. So I'll take a smaller brush. You can just use whatever brush is comfortable for you, but you might just use a little bit of a smaller one. And I'm just going to paint the ends of his claws on his feet here, just to kind of bring those out a little bit more in you know, a slightly different way from the rest of his body. And again, I don't think this is technically, you know, canon, because all of the images that I've pulled up of Ghidorah, of King Ghidorah, he's basically just a solid gold color all around. But, you know, we can take a few artistic liberties here, because why not? Yeah, there we go, just a little bit something like that. And then we might as well, yeah, again, just for sort of like some, you know, extra detail's sake here, or you know, whatever, just some artistic liberty. Why don't we get like his horns too? And that will just make sort of the details on his head stand out just a little bit more from the rest of his body. There we go, that kind of brings out his horns just a little bit more. That looks pretty cool too. And then we might as well get the sort of, you know, like horns on his necks as well. That looks pretty cool, that just stands out a little bit. And then we'll just get the little sort of like spikes on his tails here too. I guess I don't know, because I haven't... I saw Godzilla King of the Monsters, which was like the, you know, the 2019 movie, the sequel to the, you know, like 2014 Godzilla movie. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't care for it very much, but I know a lot of people did really like it a lot. And I do remember that King Ghidorah was in that movie, but I don't really remember like anything that he did specifically. I don't remember any particular moves or abilities or powers or anything that he had other than like creating lightning storms, and I think he had like an EMP effect on like cities. I don't remember. But maybe he used you know, these tails as like sort of morning stars. Like the medieval weapon with the chain and the spiked ball on the end. I believe the proper title for that is a Morning Star. I might be wrong about that. I think that like if you were to play Dungeons and Dragons, they call them flails. But you know, anyone who's a medieval weapons expert, feel free to correct me in the comments whether that's called a Morning Star or a flail or what the proper term of that for that particular weapon is. But maybe he uses his tail like that. So why don't we just, you know, highlight these spikes a little bit more to make it clear that he's got that ability, because I think that that looks pretty cool and that stands out in a really interesting way. Okay, there we go. So that looks pretty cool. We've got the claws the little spiky bits on his tail and his horns, I would say that you are done. At this point, if you want to just call it, you are good to go. But the very last thing that I'm going to do is maybe a little bit of a gutsy, ambitious thing, and maybe I shouldn't do it, maybe it's going to turn out really poorly, but who cares? Why don't we just do it anyway? So I'm going to do the teeth. I'm just going to dot each little tooth. I'm going to take out a super, super sharp, teeny tiny detail brush, and I'm just going to get a little bit of paint onto the tip of my very sharp point right here, and I'm just going to dot each little tooth on each of his mouths. And maybe that'll bring out his mouth just a little bit more in a slightly more realistic way. I would definitely say that this is purely optional. You definitely don't have to do this if you don't want to. But again, I'm feeling kind of gutsy, and I'm feeling like, why don't we take some risks? Because that's how you accomplish things in life, is by taking risks and doing things that you're not completely sure about. Sometimes, anyway. There we go. I think that is pretty... That's okay. That will do just fine. That's just enough to make them stand out a little bit. I mean, it's not like the most detailed kind of thing ever, but that's okay, because we're just sort of doing like table-ready miniatures that just look a little bit better than the core paint jobs that come with the miniatures. And the very last thing that I'm going to do is a completely optional thing, I would say, but I am going to add a layer of varnish to them, if I can find it here. Yeah, so I'll just get some matte varnish right here, and I'm just going to apply an even layer of this over the whole miniature, and that just sort of increases the lifespan of the paint job just a little bit more, makes it so that the paint doesn't wear off quite as easily. Again, if you saw the Godzilla video that I did before this, then you've already seen me go through this, so I'll spare you there again, but I am just going to go over the whole miniature with this, and then that'll be it.
Alright, well there you go everybody, that's a really simple paint job for King Ghidorah from Godzilla Tokyo Clash. I think that anyone of any skill level can knock that paint job out, and there are probably, like, you know, more professional or better ways to do this particular miniature, but if you're new to the hobby and you just want to have a good time and you just want to knock it out really quickly, because this took me like 20 minutes, then this is a good one to go for, I think. So if you like the video, go ahead and throw it a like. If you want to see the rest of the Godzilla Tokyo Clash board game being painted, you can subscribe to the channel. I've got a couple more. I've got Mothra to do next. Mothra's not going to be as difficult as I initially thought, but she is still going to be probably the most time-consuming one, so we'll save her for last. And the other one... Oh, I forget the monster's name! Dorland. Godzilla fans, don't hate me, and I'm sorry. But I won't take up any more of your time, so thank you again so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.